All right. Welcome everybody to our Time at Work meeting in March. It's great to see so many of you here. Today we have a talk by Dr. Nick Quinn and Alison Gibb. The topic of the talk is establishing professional practice, developing graduate attributes through active feedback in experiential settings. Now, Dr. Nick Quinn is a senior lecturer in entrepreneurship and associate director for connections with practice with responsibility for learning and teaching and professional education at the University of Glasgow. Nick joined academia following a successful career in industry, consulting, and learning development. His research is focused on experiential learning, the development of graduate attributes and professional skills, centered on creating new approaches to helping students develop their graduate attributes and employability, whilst preserving their agency in the experiential setting. Alison Gibb is a senior lecturer in marketing and associate director, learning and teaching, responsibility for learning experience in the Adam Smith Business School at the University of Glasgow. Alison joined the Adam Smith Business School following a successful career in industry, where she held several senior international marketing positions. She teaches at the undergraduate, master's, MBA levels, and her research interests focus on professional practice, experiential learning, and developing graduate attributes. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. You can. We are looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Carolina. You've just stolen my first slide. Interesting as a second I share here.
Okay, the right one.
Right one. Someone in.
That's right one.
Right. Good. Okay. So yeah, thank you, Carolina. As Carolina said, Alison and I, Adam Smith Business School at the University of Glasgow.
Just one thing to say, at the moment, we can see only the presentations view, so not the...
Right, it says I can swap displays. Why is it not working? Okay.
Yeah,
no.
yes, that was...
Yeah.
No.
If I do that, why won't let me do it? Very embarrassing. There you go.
Yes.
You got it now?
Yes.
So yeah, as Carolina says, Alice and I both work in the business school at the University of Glasgow, and both are what we might call second career academics. So I'm the programme director for the MBA and executive education in the school, and Alison is the associate director of learning and teaching. And our backgrounds lends itself very much to this mode of experiential learning. And a couple of years ago, we started working with Professor David Nicholl on his inner feedback and active feedback approach. And we wanted to see if we could apply this to our own area of teaching, very much around the experiential components, working with MBAs. So what we're going to talk to you through today is a quick run through of what we did and why we did it, and then kind of through some of the feedback that we got from the stakeholders in the process. The course itself is a compressed 2-week capstone consultancy course for MBA candidates in the university. At this point here, and on previous sittings, what we found was that many of our students and candidates might take a far more less an active approach, shall we say, to the development. And we wanted to find a way that would allow us to really understand how they would learn to use the consultancy frameworks themselves without us necessarily taking too much to control. So we want to talk to you more around what the active feedback is, understanding around the kind of theory to practice that we've looked at, and then take you through that endpoint with some findings that we came up with.
So actually, I'll take you through the course because it's my course that I designed for the MBA. It's, as Nick said, it's a capstone course entitled MBA Consultancy. So basically what happens at the end of the taught element of the MBA, we bring all the students together before they go on to do their individual piece of research over the summer. And we let them loose, as I like to say, on live clients. This year, I think we will have around about 14 live clients working with the MBA cohort when we run this, and we'll be running it in May. We pick the clients knowing that the students have got previous work experience and previous knowledge, that they have come to us, they've given up their time and work to come and study with us full time. So their minds are not in that zone at the time, and we're launching them straight back into a real live consultancy project. The course itself has minimal taught content, and what I mean by that is I don't introduce any new knowledge as part of this course. I take them through consulting techniques and consulting metrics, some of which I've used myself, and the big consultancy firms use, so the likes of McKinsey, Boston Consulting, etc. They use these types of techniques, and we give them their projects, which they have some agency over picking and deciding on how they get into those teams. But the students very much define the approach to the projects. I don't tell them what to do. I don't tell them what the solution should be. It's very much student-led. They set their own working day. They've got nothing else scheduled for the 2 weeks that they're working on this. So their entire time is focused on this. And it is very much that we set them up to be real consultants consulting on a live business problem that these clients need solved. And we work with clients of all sizes. Mostly in this course, we are looking at some of the bigger clients. So we've worked with Barclays in the past. We've worked with Velux Blends. We've worked with, we did a project on the Adam Smith Business School in the past. So of all ranges, and also not always local. Sometimes they are international, which means there's different time zones involved, etc. So very much the students have agency over those projects. I don't tell them what to do. There are 3 roles in this to make it work properly. So there's obviously the teacher role, and that's the role that I take and Nick helps out with me on, looking at very much guidance, a hands-off approach, but we are guiding the students so that we get a successful outcome for them and also for the clients. There is a student role, which they are taking on the role of students, so learning how to apply the knowledge that they've gained in the MBA since they joined us in September, but also working as consultants. And then there is the role of the external partners in this, because they have to also be engaged. And if the 3 roles don't work together, that's when it starts to break down. And the reason that we designed this was that we realised quite early on, after joining the school, that there's a kind of breakdown in terms of graduates coming out of courses and slotting back into industry, or if we apply this to undergraduate and postgraduate teaching as well, not just the MBA. In fact, where they haven't had any work experience before, it's how do they apply and acquire those soft skills and the professional experience that they're going to need when they go out into the workplace. And there's lots of literature around that that we can find online. Also, the feedback that we get from the students is that they want more work experience. They want to start building that CV a lot earlier so that they're in a better place when they go into industry. I had one of my students this year say to me they were really looking forward to this because previously his entire life he had been a chef, for example, and he wanted to develop the right language skills and the right professional skills to go back into the world of work, but into business rather than chefing when he leaves us from the MBA. So there's lots of feedback on this. The accreditation bodies also look for it, and as a triple accredited school, we need to make sure that we're speaking to those accreditation criteria as well. Okay, so the course design goes through several stages. I've got the ILOs there on the screen. I'll not insult you by reading them. I'll I can discuss them more when we stop for questions later on if you would like. But basically the scaffolding part is up front. It's at the start. So I into the session, what the cases are, what the overviews of the clients are. The students then go through a process of bidding to work in teams. They can either bid individually or they can bid as a team to work for a client, and the best bid wins. So it's putting that competitive element in there, which you would get if you were a consultant and you were bidding for a piece of business, so close to real life. We then have a session that looks at scaffolding, how you approach the brief, how you structure your communication. Previously, we would launch straight into the group work then and the actual consulting work. But what we noticed from that was that when the students met with their clients, they weren't very well prepared. Actually, they would skip a lot of the preparation piece of that. So working with Nick and with David Nicol, who's here in the school, we looked at developing a session that would scaffold that client meeting piece so that the students got the best out of the client meeting, but also so that the clients didn't have to continuously repeat themselves throughout the project, because the students hadn't asked the right questions and they hadn't prepared. And that's the piece that we're going to talk to you about in more detail in a minute. Coming out of that client meeting activity, the students then go into their independent teamwork. They are monitored by having supervisors, but they also have to submit project logs so that we can see their progress as they work through project. And then the assessment towards the end of it is that they present, and it's a live presentation to their client, where they present their brief that they've been given. So they don't write an academic piece for this course. It's very much client focused, and they get the feedback almost instantly from the client on the day. They obviously get graded and we support them with a rubric, etc. through that. They get feedback from their group, but they then also get a chance to write a reflective report on the whole experience, what they've taken out of it, and what they're going to take forward, one for their CV, and two, when they go back into the world of work. What would they change? How would they adapt? And what have they learned from the experience? And they then get individual feedback on that piece. So that's basically how the course is set up. So the why have we brought in this active feedback element? Well, where we were finding with the meeting and the first client meeting, the students weren't adequately prepared for that client interaction, and that had multiple impacts. So obviously it had an impact on the whole course outcome. It had an impact on the students' experience overall because they weren't as confident, their recommendations weren't as good, which meant that the output wasn't optimized for the student or for the client. It also had an impact reputationally on us as teachers, but also on the school and on the students. So personally, I bring in some of my contacts from the business world, people that I've worked with over the years, people that I might be working with now, people that I might be consulting with. So I'm almost recommending the quality of our students. And if they don't prepare properly and they're not well prepared and they don't perform well in front of the client, that affects me, that affects my personal reputation, but also affects my reputation as a teacher. It also has an impact on the school because then we can't go back to these clients again and ask them to be involved in other courses and other projects and to continue working with us. And it affects any potential research that we might want to do with those companies going forward. It's a lack of true knowledge exchange, because if the students aren't up to speed with what they should be doing when they go into that client interaction, then they're not really passing on the knowledge that they can for the clients, and the clients aren't passing on the knowledge that they can back to the students, which means that they're not developing those professional skills that they're going to need when they go out into the real world. The other thing it does is it helps us with our workload, in terms of that constant need for feedback that the students feel. So when you put them into a boardroom situation with clients, they immediately want to know how they've done when they come out of that. They then want to know if the questions they were asking were right. They then want to know, have they done the right thing? Have they approached it the right way? And we needed to find a way to help with that workload and to manage all of these projects and to make this scalable at undergraduate and postgraduate talk levels as well.
So the active feedback element draws from David's work on inner feedback, and we were looking at comparison. Effectively, the theory suggests that it's a natural approach that we all compare all the time. But actually, when we talk about this one in literature, often many will focus on dialogue as a comparator. So we get feedback from teacher, feedback from each other in groups or other individuals. We wanted to take it a bit further. So working with David, we were able to look at other kind of resources that we might want to put in there that helped us to understand how the students could build their plan from scratch without that impact from us or that input from us at every stage. And what we felt was that the resources themselves generate a greater range of feedback. As students are building their own understanding of a topic, using those comparisons and that feedback, they're able to then build that on a bigger scale, because they've not just got dialogue to compare to, they've got resources that could be anything from videos, lecture notes, it could be active sessions, it could be cartoons, drawings, diagrams. Anything can really be used as a resource for this feedback, and we can use that then to compare to other components, and we'll show you how we did that in a few minutes. What we also want to do was choose options for comparison that were dissimilar to what students would normally get. So as you'll see on this, we have an article that we used. We also have a video from the medical school. So we've got quite a wide range of different options that the students can compare their written work to. I also want to make sure that students had a chance to be creative throughout the process, and so they create the first object, which is the meeting plan, and then they generate the comparisons all the way through to build it up and to build it to a point that it's more useful for them. And it's what David says is that the feedback itself is generated from these resources, the bit that's always been there that was never really quite captured, and that's the really important element that we'll go on to talk about. And what I found is it improves the learner's agency. We don't have to tell them what they've learned. They learn that for themselves, and they build it into that learning as they move through. Really importantly, though, we wanted to make sure that agency in terms of the students was preserved as much as we possibly can. Even at MBA level, there's a tendency perhaps for candidates to want to be led by the hand, told what to do, and given the answers, what's the right way of doing things. So if we just gave students comparisons, so exemplars of a meeting plan, let's say it's a good meeting plan, use that. Quite often they'll just do a version of that one, and it's not really giving them much agency in the process. We wanted to find a way that allowed students to really be creative, to use and harness that creativity, but to preserve their agency throughout, because we felt that would be a bigger learning point than just us giving resources and saying, here, this is what you should actually be doing. So then they can make their own feedback judgments rather than just that of others. And again, they're not just waiting on whatever Alison and I might tell them, or the client for that matter. And actually, as we started to build into it, we found that the feedback from clients wasn't in itself a new resource that we hadn't really looked at before. So the really important bit here is there's no limit to the kind of feedback that students can generate, because once we've shown them how to use the process and to understand why they've been asked to compare to certain resources, students, what we find is they start to do that for themselves. So they're finding other resources they compare it to improve their meeting plans, in this case, or whatever work they're actually carrying out. One of the kind of really important bit was that, the theory, as we'll show you in a second, is that we do something. In this case, we create a meeting plan, we compare it to something, and we've got a process we've gone through. Then we make explicit changes to our work. So we're improving our work, but making those improvements explicit in the written material. And it's really important, because it means then students can see how they've progressed through, and they're embedding that learning as they work through it, so they can see their own feedback capability increasing. They're also very aware that they're in charge of the whole process. That agency is preserved, and they're aware that kind of metacognitive a process that they're moving through. It also allows us to look at understanding what it is that students need, because we're able to take a far more indirect approach. Rather than having to lead the course or the content, we're able to sort of stand back and observe, watch what's happening, ask relevant questions when required, and understand where different students are at. As you might appreciate, in an MBA, some people will be very comfortable with the whole process of consultancy. Some will be the very first time they've ever done it. So it's quite a learning curve for some. So that comparative component happens within the team, within individuals, and within the course as a whole. And really, it's that kind of intersection between building the theory to building to practice, and giving students opportunity to practice and to learn from doing, as opposed to just being told. As I said, the process that David is created and we've kind of built on is that students do something, they try to write. And that could be, as you know, if you follow David's work, you know, it could be anything from writing a paragraph or a piece of work, or an element of a lit review, and a meeting plan that you could use to meet a client for the very first time. So we ask the students to do that before they come to the very first class. So they're not copying off anyone else, they're not sharing it. They've all got different elements or different approaches that they may have taken. What's really important is we say, well, you can do anything. You can make a script or a table. You can make it perhaps a drawing or even a cartoon. It's really entirely up to you. As long as it takes you through the process, that allows you to meet the client and to have that good first conversation that we realise is so important. Then we can compare it to, as we'll show you in a second, the main resources that we provide, that we curate, and then make those explicit. So I'll take you through and that builds the inner feedback, so that it's always going in, so they become a kind of loop, as we'll show you in the next slide. This is a kind of map of what we typically do in this. We've run this process now a few times, both on the MBA and other courses, and this is the third time running it, I think, with the MBA.
Yes, this is the third time we're running it, and actually I've changed it slightly for this year to address a bit of an AI question. I've tried it with a different cohort. I'm going to try it again with this cohort coming up. So students, the first activity is that the students produce a written client meeting plan. What I was finding was that they were coming to class without having produced that client meeting plan, and we were having to play catch up. So this time I have asked them to use AI to create a client meeting plan. So we use that then as the first basis. So they all come with an individual meeting plan now, but that AI has produced for them. And it also gives me an opportunity to tell them how to critique what AI is spitting out for them, which I think is becoming increasingly important. We then give them their first resource comparison, which is an excerpt from an article on learning credibility tension. The reference to that is down in the bottom of this slide here, 2018. The students read that article individually, and then they look at the individual meeting plan that they have come up with, or that they've come with, be it AI or writing it themselves. I then ask them at that point to think about that meeting plan and then make explicit the changes that they would make to that meeting plan after reading the article. And then we have a bit of feedback in class and talk about those kind of changes. Without giving any further direction, I then give them a second comparison resource where they compare their individual client meeting plan with the changes that they made with the rest of their team. So at this point, they are now sitting in their teams, and we have to get them all into one plan for their team meeting that they're having, because they're not having individual meetings, they're meeting in their consultancy team with their client. So at that point, we try and move to a team plan, and the students then make the changes to make that explicit to create a single team plan at that stage. So by this point, we've done 2, if not 3 comparisons, because we've got discussion ongoing in class. We then introduce a second resource, which is the third comparison, if you like, which is a video, and it's the video that Nick alluded to, which we have borrowed from MBLS, I think it came
from medicine.
From medicine. And that is a patient OSCE. It's students role-playing the OSCE, which is, you'll have had it done to you if you've ever been to the doctors, where the doctor talks to you about your symptoms to try and get to the bottom of it. The students are then asked to think about what they've seen, we discuss in class, and then they go back to what is their team meeting plan and make explicit the changes that they would make at that point to their meeting plan. And then we have a bit of dialogue around what the students are going to do and tidying up their meeting plans for going to meet the client. They then go and meet the client, and what we ask them to do following the client meeting is to have a team debrief and to go through and think about what happened in that meeting and refer back to their plan again and say what would they change for future, because this is a skill that they're going to have to do over and over again in the types of jobs that they're going to have. And if they're not going into consulting, they are going to have to go into boardrooms, they are going to have to go and meet with clients, suppliers, colleagues. This is something that they're going to have to be able to do. So we ask them to think about what would they have done differently and what will they do differently in the future. So various comparisons there. So what we've got here is a whole course approach. So it extends across one single activity, but there's cycles throughout the course. So it goes from planning to coming into the meeting, actually the meeting itself, and then coming out of the other end of that meeting too. And what we're trying to do is encourage student agency. So they are in control of that learning experience. They are in control of what the outcome from that experience is, and it will be different for every student in that course. Even if they end up in a group with people, where they started is very different to where their colleagues or the other candidates in that course started with them. And that becomes much more impactful. It also allows us to scale up what we're trying to do in terms of developing graduate attributes. And that focus on multiple non-similar bar resources means that the students actually control the development of their learning rather than us hand feeding them and they just repeating parrot fashion or copying what we're giving them. Because it's different to what they're doing and it's not similar to what they're actually doing, it means that they have to generate that feedback themselves and make explicit what the output from that is.
An important element here is, you may be thinking, oh, it's reduced our workload. And on the face of it, it sounds like, perhaps as teachers, we're a bit irrelevant in the process because the students are doing all the work and we're not doing very much. But what's really important here is it changes the role of the teacher in the room. So although we're not having the usual sort of didactic telling students what to do and guiding them directly because they've got this agency, we recognise that instructions at this point are extremely important. And what we do is we don't shy away from telling the students what we're up to. So it's not like some kind of subversive stealth tactic to get them to do things. What we really do is we foreground that by telling them this is the process we're using and why we're actually using it. So we give them quite specific instructions and kind of questions that they can ask as part of the process, and we give them that. We've used a variety of different approaches on these worksheets, but ultimately we give the students some kind of worksheet to go with the process. What that does, it helps students just to kind of think about it being a long-term process through not just the workshop, but as Alison said, throughout the whole process, especially when we're working with these kind of far non-similar resources. So the OSCE video, first of all, students kind of watch it and it's a kind of a dawning realization that although this is a non-similar environment, it's not anything like consulting. There's an awful lot that they can learn from it. So they're drawing out elements of making the patient, in this case, the client, comfortable asking those kind of foregrounding questions before they get to the key point. They're not trying to diagnose straight away. And these are all elements that we would really like our students to know. But if we just told them, then it's just that's what Alison and Nick say. I should be not getting to the diagnosis straight away. I shouldn't be doing this or that. And what we find is that students pick all this up themselves. So the worksheet and the questions are really important to kind of guide them through the whole process.
So we've run this across several courses. at undergraduate, postgraduate, and our MBA over the last 3 sessions. I think we've done it, and we're about to do it for the 4th time. While we've been doing that, we've been trying to gather some data to look at what the student experience of it is, what the client experience is, and what our experience is. And we can talk a little bit about some of that just now. So from the student perspective, we have gathered some qualitative data from them. And the key themes that has come out of that is that the students themselves report that they understand the client perspective much better. They don't jump straight to solution. They actually have to listen. They learn how to listen to their client. They learn the importance of preparation so that they can listen to the right things from their client, and they don't jump straight to solution. The relationship, therefore, is much better with their client. Management throughout the course and throughout the work that they're doing is much improved, which gives us better outcomes. And that it's all about preparation. If they don't do the preparation, they can absolutely see the difference. So some of the quotes from the students that we have here is that they've learned to ask the hard questions. You know, they're a bit more confident. They be respectful, but don't be afraid to challenge your client. Pay attention to the cues and use them to inform questions and information. This exercise has taught me how to approach a client and kick off a professional meeting, taught me important things to keep in mind, and various other quotes that we can do there. Client?
Yeah, just supporting the student one actually is that all those student learning points don't come from us. We've not taught them any of that. They've learned that for themselves. These are all things that have surfaced from the activity as opposed to taught content. And it's mirrored by the client experience. And what we found was in the past, some of the clients were they weren't unimpressed, but you know, I think they had to kind of guide students through the process sometimes and kind of catch them a little bit when they were getting too far ahead. The first time we did it in particular, the feedback was spectacular. It was, you know, what they commented on was our students over the past 3 sessions, the quality and the professionalism that they displayed and the understanding they had of the client and the client issue. And again, that preparation that they came across as very prepared. So that first setting scene, so that, you know, they're able to kind of create a resonance with the client very early on, which really has a strong impact on the outcomes for the whole process. So again, a couple of great quotes there, but really capturing that sense that the clients are really impressed again with our students. Also, in terms of that one, we did a net promoter score, just a bit of kind of quantitative feedback, all very high. So of the clients we've had over the past 3 years, we've got an average of 9.2, which is an experience pretty high in the business school. Very, very happy indeed with the process. And for us, what was really gratifying was this wasn't anything that we taught the students to do. They've learned all themselves. So they've maintained that agency throughout the whole process. And they've picked this up from resources that we've carefully curated, admittedly. But they've picked out the right kind of points and worked together in teams to deliver that professional outcome. So just to kind of summarize really is the key themes that we've picked out is that, you know, we've kind of mentioned the agency and creativity quite a lot. We feel this is a really important element. But as Alison has said, what's also important here is this is a skill not just for the classroom and for this one course or one activity. It's a skill they can take outside of the classroom and use both in other courses and outside of the degree programme. It's also very inclusive because it requires, because of the natural process the students are going through, it involves all elements in the team, and it's also self-regulatory. So, you know, students control the pace that they're going through and how they do that. It's also authentic. I think often we talk to colleagues about it and they will say, well, you're giving people things to compare to. Is that not cheating? And comparison is not cheating. It's a natural process that we all go from when we learn to walk and use knife and fork right through to doing these sorts of things. Both Alice and I are very focused on delivering these graduate attributes, these workplace competencies in our students. And we found that the 2 biggest ones are that students feel far more confident in themselves, you know, and for the future of working with clients. And we see this, those students who go on to do industry projects through the summer for dissertation, they hit it at a much higher level. They're, you know, able to engage with clients more quickly, more easily, and get to the nub of the problem more easily. So we see that again, that self-efficacy has been kind of improved, and again, we leave them with the ability to develop their own feedback and an understanding of why that might be and how to go about it. And importantly for us, once you've created the resources and created that process, it doesn't increase, in fact, it decreases the workload, any preparation we've got to do, and particularly in the classroom itself. So it addresses that kind of thorny problem of increased workload issues.
I think there's one point not on that slide that we always get asked, and I forgot to add it today. The grades have gone up.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks volumes. The grades were always sat kind of similar year on year. Since we've started doing this with them, their grades have gone up, both for the presentation and the self-reflection, which I think is really interesting, because it means that the quality is higher, but also the quality for the client is higher. And we have clients returning year on year now, whereas before quite often clients it was one and done. So they're impressed with the standard, and the student standard has increased as well.
Yeah.
No.
What we also did was, as part of this process, and just to be more sort of transparent with our colleagues and just get some sort of feedback on how it was working from an external perspective, we've got a resource in the school of our learning innovation team. So we asked one and watch one of the sessions. What she was able to tell us was that, you know, she saw a classroom that was highly engaged. Even when we weren't talking, when the students were working in their own teams, what she saw was they were engaged in discussions with each other. They were actively comparing, and what she was able to see is that after the resource comparisons we gave, is that students were starting to do that themselves, and those kind of discussions were emerging in the teams. Her output was that it was distinctive. There was a clear boost in terms of creativity and interaction, and that was linked very strongly to the ILOs that we covered at the beginning, and that the process itself acts as a very effective scaffold for achieving the class aims. Also, that this was linked very clearly to the rest of the course and the final assignment. So this was a piece of work that not only foregrounded what skills the students needed to have that very first meeting, but what they needed to carry on throughout and achieve a better grade. And by having that better first meeting, as Alison says, it's had a definite uptick in the grades that students achieve. Really, I think, in summary, is that, you know, I think we're very happy with the process, and it's really made a big difference both for our own teaching approach as well as those of our students, and we're very happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Nick and Alison. That's really interesting. So while you were presenting this, I was thinking, and I put it in the chat as well. This is basically what I do in psychology with service learning. So I call it, you call it experiential learning, but so it's basically service learning, what I do. Obviously different topics, but it is a module where students first learn about different learning strategies and the research behind those strategies and why they work. And then based on that knowledge, they design how to study tutorials for pupils and then go to the local schools and deliver the tutorials. So it's quite interesting. And I found, again, I have actually not a single question, but I thought your evaluation of it was the increase in confidence, and what one part of it, the evaluation is also when you see that your clients, in my case, the schools, want to come back and do another project with you next year. Absolutely. And that's like the best reward you can get. It's absolutely amazing. It's quite interesting to see that you, in your context, the way you do it, find the same thing. So it's quite good. I'm going to open the floor to questions. Maxine.
Hi there. Thank you very much, Nick and Alison. Really enjoyed your talk. And it's really interesting because I've done something with inner feedback, self-feedback generation, in one of the courses I teach. And similarly, I'm always impressed with the comments that the students come up with for themselves, and they're often much better than what we as staff can provide. Often, it's really quite surprising. I guess my question was, in terms of the sort of final marking time for I think it was a reflection that the staff marked, as well as the meeting plan. Have you found the time that it takes to mark those, has that gone down since you've started the several stages of comparison? Do you feel that the feedback that you're providing doesn't need to be as extensive, or have you noticed anything from that side of workload?
So it's a good question. So for the MBA, specifically, because that's what this is kind of structured around, but we do this. It's been so successful in the MBA, we've started scaling it up and doing it at undergraduate and postgraduate as well. But I mark the whole class. I mark everything for the class because I think it's fairer, because they're quite competitive. I have noticed the marking time has gone down. Now, the number of words hasn't gone down. The assessment question, if you like, hasn't changed. The quality is higher. And I don't find myself having to search to get a higher grade or to go and try and help the students. I find that they're kind of doing this when they start and write their reflection now as well. So they talk about, you know, where they started off and where they've ended up, and it is, and what they're going to take forward, because part of the question is, what are you taking out into the real world? And yeah, the marking time has gone down because the quality has gone up. It's much easier for me to mark, and I'll be honest, it's much more enjoyable for me to mark. So yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. Any other questions from the audience, either on camera or in the chat? Well, maybe I can ask a question then. Helena, 1 second. I will let you first, Helena. You can go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it's a kind of different question, you know. It's not quite to do with this activity, which I think is really great. And I've used something similar to make tutorial sessions to get students to identify exemplars that are not 100% the thing, but slightly off, and also what's kind of like for the next assessment. You know, it might not be the same, might not be an essay or something like that. So I think it works really well when they can do that. I think for us, one of the challenges has been finding this iterative thing, because you have to kind of like devote quite a bit of time to come for one session and then come for another session and then come for another session, and to motivate students to do that. So maybe it's to ask just how has it scaled up to the bigger classes, doing that kind of thing?
Yeah, so actually we do all of these comparisons, the kind of focused piece with the worksheets in one session. And it is it's embedded now into the course. So it's a 2-hour session. They come with their first piece that they've created themselves, and we go through the cycle within one session.
Yep.
Which makes it much more manageable.
Actually, talking of scale, last year, Alison and I teach a compressed consultancy course at undergraduate level, which we're doing next week actually. And Alison and I did the same element with 130 students in the same class, again as an active sort of session. And again, even at scale, it works exactly the same way. So we can use it with 50 students, or we can use it with 100, 150. In terms of extending it, I've also used it with, I teach some engineers entrepreneurial classes as part of their final year, and I've used it as a process going way through. But each week I'm changing the resources, I'm changing the point of it. Some weeks it'll be scaffolded around understanding the assignment, and that might actually involve things like exemplars or discussion around that. I switch in dialogue and physical resources as well. So we're using that ongoing process again to get students to think differently about topics, particularly the engineers they're not familiar with. So it's been really helpful for getting them to sort of question the topics and understand that one in a way, as opposed to me having to say, this is what you should be learning or what you should be doing and taking away from it. So we've done it in quite a wide variety of different sort of settings as well, and we're finding similar kinds of results.
Okay, so maybe my only follow-up question on that would be, what does it look like? Because you get them to read through a resource. Do they do that in class? And then you get them to watch a video, and that might be a whole class watching the video and taking back to their. Sorry, I'm just because in the past I've had so you'll have quite a lot of students who English is not their first language and things like that. So just kind of like, how do you manage those kinds of things as well in those sessions?
We don't give them a full. We give them an excerpt of a paper. So it's the bits we think we created it. So we think in that resource there are 3-4 pages which are critical, we think, to this initial process. So we've taken them out, and so rather than giving a 30-page paper, I agree. I think that would be a disaster. I think in there. The video itself is only about 5 or 6 minutes long.
Yeah,
So
we don't show the full.
No, and it's only the key points.
There's key points. We've also got notes that we share between us now, depending on what class we're doing it in, that go with the resources. So when we go back to the room after and we get them to feedback, well, what have you learned? What would you take from that? We ask key questions. We make sure that the key points that we would like them to get out of it are vocalized within the room before we put them back into their groups, to make the update before we move to the next, to make their comparison explicit before we then move to the next step. So the work is done up front. I'm not saying that it reduces your work overall, because it doesn't, but what it does do is it makes you a lot more organized. Or at least it's made me a lot more organized, which is a good thing. We've had to scaffold it up front. We've had to really think through the process. Now we've done it, actually I'm finding myself applying it in lots of different courses, and Nick's doing the same. And we even went to Heriot Watt to help them with an engineering course of 200 at the start of this academic year.
And ironically, that process that Alice is talking about is actually active feedback in practice. We are comparing resources, the classes of students are the resources that we're comparing our piece of work to, and then updating it, so making it explicit. So we're using the process ourselves, and again, as Alison says, it makes life easier each time you run the cycle. You're getting to a point where you've got a better and better resource to use. And
you don't need to start with multiple resources. No. I mean, Nick and I are really bad for just launching into these things and adding and adding and adding. We do. So David's been very useful, actually, because he's helped draw us
very patient
and very patient with us. Yes. So you don't need to start with as many resources. We just like to do it that way. Yeah.
Thank you, Helena. Thank you. We have a question from Spot.
Hello, can you hear me okay on this microphone?
Yes.
Okay, so you've been the soundtrack to my drive home. I'm parked safely at the other end now and the engine's off. I have a question from the perspective of someone who's spending a lot of time speaking to people about redesigning their assessments in light of AI. The audio cut out a little bit through some of my drive. Am I right, before I ask my main question, in saying that there's a significant part of what they get graded on at the end is a reflection on the process, right? That premise is correct here. So then one of the things that lots of people say is, oh, to make your assessment AI proof, incorporate an element of reflection, but AI can simulate a reflection. It can just say things that sound reflective as well. So my question to you is, I think this one it seems particularly obvious when a student is not reflecting on something real. But you, as the person just faced with something at the end, what would you say are the hallmarks of this student is actually reflecting on something that happened? Is it because you can see that it's tied to so many other things that they've talked about before, or is it something else? Because that's the big question that everybody else is going, okay, well, I can theoretically do that, but how do I know if it's a genuine reflection on a real thing or if it's just made up by the AI?
So for this, the AI can't reflect on this for them because AI hasn't been in the room with them. So I asked them specifically to reflect on pieces of their group work. So maybe what went wrong, what didn't, what went really well, what they would change for the next time. And I asked that they have to give specific examples. So I'm not interested in them supporting with literature. I tell about that because we're beyond that when we get to this stage. What I want to know about is what happened in the room. I wasn't in your group meetings with you. What happened? Did you fall out? You know, did you perhaps, did someone not turn up? What do you do when you need something like that? Sorry, there's someone coming into the room. So AI can't make that stuff up. AI doesn't know who's in the group with them. It would take them longer to write the prompts for AI than it would to actually just write the reflection. And you can tell, I had an instance last year where a student copied a reflective report on a piece of consultancy that was done at Newcastle University, and it stood out like a sore thumb. And when I went in and found it, I could highlight all the sections that they had copied. So it's if they do it, it's blatant. It's really, really obvious. And they don't know what AI doesn't know, for example, if your client is Barclays, what challenges Barclays are facing in getting people to return to the workplace. They don't know that there's a running track in the roof that nobody uses, or that Wagamama has pulled out because the footfall isn't big enough. It's you would have to feed all that in to be able to get it. It is one of the reasons the course is designed that way, because I think the big issue with AI now is that you can plug in an essay question and they'll bump it back. It'll bump it back within 30 seconds. You know, the references might not be right, but who's checking every reference in a class of 200? Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Maybe time for one more before we close. If that's not the case, I'm going to just ask my question. So what would you say are the top 2 or 3 main challenges with this course? So something that you kind of have to keep an eye on, or need to find a solution for. What would you say is that?
Question.
Good question. So with regards to the active feedback element of it, or just the course in general?
Course in general.
Course in general. So the biggest thing is, which I'm sure everybody could guess, would be making sure that participation and engagement.
Yep.
I'm running a similar course at the moment that's over a longer period of time, and I've had 2 students that weren't engaging. We've now fixed that. You've got to be on top of it. Also, the assessment is designed that if they don't participate, they can't pass the assessment because they've got nothing to write about. And I had to change the assessment from the original assessment for this course to embed that. I think the other thing in terms of the active feedback, when you pull out the OSCE video, they're okay with the they're okay with the excerpt. They're actually okay with the AI piece. They think it's quite funny to be asked to do their homework on AI. When you then pull up the OSCE video of the 2 doctors speaking, they kind of look at you as if internally they look at us as if we've lost it. And it's getting them to stay with you. And they do get the point of it when we get to the other end of that, but it's keeping the students invested. So that, and it's explaining to them and giving them the instructions. That's why instructions are so important in this. Because you've got to take them with you, otherwise they just don't engage.
Why we showing? And I'd add one to that one. That might just be me personally, and it comes back to those instructions is not getting too involved. I think I like experiential teaching because I can get involved, and it's an interesting kind of terrain to work with, and because both of us come from that background of being consultants, it can be quite hard sometimes to tell too much, and recognizing that the important bit here to maintain is student agency, the student control over the whole process, that it's their process, not ours. And I find that probably one of the hardest things, actually, shutting up and asking questions and letting it go.
Yeah. And not get too excited if it's an amazing brief, not getting too excited about it and wanting to solve it, because it's very much their journey and their project, not ours.
I think these were fantastic concluding comments. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your talk as well. And it was very interesting. And I love to talk to you a little bit more about it, because just to share more experiences around this kind of learning and approach to teaching, if you didn't mind. I'm going to stop the recording now, and I will see you hopefully at our next tile meeting in April. I will post about this soon. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.